Millionaire pretends to sleep to test the janitor's daughter, and freezes when he sees what she does. Ethan Walker, a name spoken with admiration in California's tech circles. He wasn't just a brilliant CEO, but the founder of a once-thriving tech company valued in the hundreds of millions. Yet these days, Ethan wasn't the same man. He was quieter, more distant, with a look in his eyes that carried disappointment and suspicion. Why? Because the man he trusted for 15 years, his CFO and closest friend, had embezzled millions, pushing the company to the brink of collapse. The betrayal wasn't just financial. It shattered what little faith Ethan had left in people. In a world where everything seemed to have a price, he began to wonder, was anyone still genuine? One late night, in the cold and silent confines of his office, Ethan sat in his familiar leather chair, staring blankly into space. Outside, the night cleaning crew had just arrived. A small figure entered the office with her mother, Lily, a 5-year-old girl with curly brown hair, daughter of Maria Gomez, the contracted janitor who had worked there for nearly 2 years. Ethan had barely noticed them before. To him, they were just names on a vendor invoice. But tonight, something tugged at his attention. An impulse, a final test, perhaps to prove to himself whether trust could still exist. He stood up, walked to the corner of the room, and opened a small safe embedded beneath a wooden cabinet. Inside was the remaining cash from the company's reserves. Not much, but everything he had managed to salvage. He left the safe wide open, bills and envelopes clearly visible. Then he returned to his chair and pretended to sleep, head tilted as if too exhausted to stay awake. Lily played quietly with a cloth doll in the corner. Maria, as usual, began dusting the desk. But Ethan, eyes half closed, watched the little girl with quiet intent. Tiny footsteps approached the safe. A moment's hesitation. Then Lily bent down. Ethan's chest tightened. He imagined her slipping a bill into her pocket. A harmless act, perhaps. He wouldn't get angry. He just needed to know, needed a reason to keep believing, or to finally let go. But what happened next left Ethan breathless. Lily didn't take a thing. Instead, she began rearranging the money inside the safe, carefully, methodically, as if it were treasure. She counted softly to herself, eyes focused, small fingers moving with surprising precision. She wore bright yellow gloves, the kind Maria gave her to help Mommy clean. Once she was done, Lily gently closed the safe, leaving it unlocked, and walked back to help her mother wipe down the desk, as if nothing had happened. Ethan kept his face serene, but something stirred deeply inside him. "Mommy, I fixed Mr. Ethan's money," Lily whispered. Maria spun around, startled. "Lily, you can't touch the boss's things." "But Mommy, it was messy. I thought he'd be happy if it was neat." Ethan kept his eyes shut, lips pressing together. A strange emotion rose in him. How long had it been since he'd seen someone, anyone, do the right thing without being asked? A child, unobserved, unprompted. And yet she chose honesty. Purely. In that moment, Ethan no longer saw Lily as the cleaner's daughter. He saw something else, a small spark of hope he didn't know he'd been waiting for. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, but his mind kept circling back to Lily, the little girl who, without instruction or supervision, chose to help rather than take. It wasn't something just any child would do, especially in a world where kindness often felt like weakness. The next morning, Ethan arrived at the office earlier than usual. He glanced at the small safe. Everything was exactly how Lily had left it, not a single bill missing. In fact, some were now neatly ordered by denomination. He smiled, his first genuine smile in months. Later that day, Maria arrived for her morning shift, with Lily in tow. Ethan decided to keep his distance, still choosing to observe. But he didn't expect that what Lily would do next would make his heart melt in a way it hadn't in years. While Maria was wiping the glass door, Lily quietly approached Ethan's desk, holding something wrapped in newspaper. Ethan peeked from the corner of his eye, pretending not to notice. The little girl gently placed it on the desk and stepped back. It was a pink piggy bank, old but polished clean. On its belly, scribbled in marker, were the words, "For Mr. Ethan." "It's so you don't feel sad about the money," Lily whispered, like sharing a secret. Maria turned around and went pale. "Lily, what are you doing? You can't give your things to strangers." "But, Mommy," Lily replied softly, "I heard Mr. Ethan was sad about losing his money. You said when we save money in the piggy bank, it grows. I want him to be happy again." Ethan couldn't pretend anymore. He looked up, locking eyes with the little girl. There was no fear in her gaze, only genuine care. "This is for me?" he asked gently. Lily nodded. "I have another one at home. You can have this." Maria blushed. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Ethan. I had no idea. I'll take it back." "No need," Ethan interrupted, picking up the piggy bank. "This is the most beautiful gift I've ever received." The room fell quiet. Ethan looked at Lily, not as a CEO, but as a man being healed. Inside him, something had begun to flicker, a tiny ember of trust reigniting after being lost for so long. From that day on, Ethan started paying more attention to Maria and Lily, not just from behind his desk, but with growing curiosity and admiration. He began to learn about their lives, not from suspicion, but from a deep desire to understand what had shaped such a remarkably honest child. He discovered Maria used to be an office assistant at a small firm. But after her husband left, she couldn't keep the job. No one to watch Lily. She juggled multiple gigs, eventually taking on contract cleaning work. Her pay was meager, yet she never complained, never missed a shift. Lily often accompanied her, doing homework in the hallway as her mom worked. One evening, Ethan overheard Maria say to Lily, "Work is how we help people, sweetie. No one forces us. We choose it, and helping others is something to be proud of." That sentence echoed in Ethan's mind. Lily hadn't learned kindness from books. She learned by watching her mother, a woman who, despite hardship, lived with dignity, never bitter, never resentful. Ethan began to realize that sometimes the most precious things aren't status or possessions, but how we choose to live each day. What started as a test had quietly become the beginning of something much deeper, a quiet, powerful healing for a man who had almost given up on people. A week had passed since Lily gave Ethan the piggy bank, but he still wasn't over it. That little pink pig now sat on his desk, nestled between project documents and high-tech screens. Every time he looked at it, a weight lifted from his chest. It had become a tiny symbol of hope during a time when Ethan thought trust was a luxury long lost. He began noticing the little things more. He asked the receptionist to quietly keep track of Maria and Lily's cleaning schedule and made sure he was in the office when they were, not to supervise, just to see them. One Thursday afternoon, heavy rain started falling unexpectedly. Maria entered the office, her coat still damp, holding a plastic bag over Lily's head to shield her from the storm. The little girl came in with wet shoes, clutching her small doll to her chest. Ethan stood near his desk, mid-conversation with his assistant, but his eyes were fixed on the scene. He watched Maria quickly grab a towel from her cleaning cart to dry Lily's hair, whispering something that made the little girl giggle. There was nothing fancy about it, nothing dramatic, just a moment, simple, tender. But for Ethan, it was a picture of love and quiet resilience. That day, he made a decision. He called Maria into his office. "Ms. Gomez," he said gently as she stepped in, visibly nervous, "I just wanted to thank you for what Lily did last week." Maria lowered her head. "I'm truly sorry if it was out of line, sir." "Not at all," Ethan shook his head. "Actually, it helped me heal." Maria looked up, surprised. Ethan continued, his voice slower now. "I know life hasn't been easy for you, and I know Lily is special. But what I don't understand is, how did you raise such kindness and honesty in a child while going through so much?" Maria smiled, soft but touched with quiet sorrow. "I didn't teach her with words, sir. I just live in a way I hope she'll learn from." The sentence silenced Ethan. In that moment, he felt the depth of who Maria was, not just a hard-working mother, but a strong, steady, compassionate woman. "Lily seems to really like you," Maria added. "Every time we get home, she says things like, 'Mr. Ethan smiled today,' or 'Mr. Ethan looks sad.' Like your family." Ethan chuckled softly, feeling a lump in his throat. "I've never had children," he admitted. "Never thought I'd be good with them. But your daughter, she's different." Maria nodded. "She's my heart. Everything I do is for her." While they talked, Lily sat outside in the hallway, coloring on a piece of scrap paper. When Maria came out, the little girl excitedly ran up to Ethan and handed him a drawing. A simple sketch of a man sleeping in a chair, an open safe, and a little girl organizing money. In the corner, she'd written in wobbly letters, "Mr. Ethan Happy." Ethan looked at the drawing, and something twisted in his chest. He didn't just see a child's drawing. He saw a memory being built, one he'd never had, but always longed for. That night, he took the drawing home. He pinned it to his refrigerator, right next to million-dollar business documents. He sat alone in his spacious, quiet kitchen, looking at the piggy bank and the child's sketch, and thought, maybe this is where life actually begins again. Since the day Lily gave him the piggy bank and her drawing, something had shifted inside Ethan, quietly but unmistakably. It wasn't the kind of change brought by infatuation or pity. It was something deeper. He wanted to understand them. Ethan started spending quiet evenings researching Maria and Lily, not to investigate, he told himself, but to seek an answer to the question that wouldn't leave him. How does a mother raise a child so kind, so honest, while living in hardship? Through HR, he learned that Maria worked part-time on a cleaning contract with no benefits or health insurance. But that wasn't her only job. Each night after leaving Ethan's company, she cleaned a small medical clinic across town. In total, she worked over 12 hours a day. He also learned where they lived, a rundown apartment complex on the outskirts of the city, mostly inhabited by immigrant working-class families. The rent consumed most of Maria's income. The one-bedroom apartment had a torn couch in the living room, her bed. What broke Ethan the most was learning that Lily suffered from chronic asthma, requiring monthly medications, expensive ones that Maria always found a way to afford. Some months, she survived on instant noodles for 2 weeks just so Lily wouldn't miss a dose. And still, she never asked for help. She was never late, never complained. She worked with quiet dignity, as though sacrifice was simply a part of her nature. One evening, Ethan happened to walk into his office just as Maria and Lily were finishing up. Lily was chatting with her ragged cloth doll, hand-stitched from fabric scraps. "You know, Emily," she whispered, "Mommy says Mr. Ethan is sad because someone took his money, but we'll help make him happy again, okay?" Ethan paused at the doorway, unseen. He saw Maria standing behind her daughter, smiling gently. She didn't know anyone was listening. That moment was like a beam of light piercing through his chest, a light he hadn't felt in years. That night, Ethan sat in his office, staring out through the tall windows at the city below. He didn't know what to do. Part of him wanted to help, deeply. But another part understood that Maria was not the kind to accept charity. Helping without wounding her pride would be delicate. The next morning, Ethan instructed the accounting department to revise the cleaning contract. He ordered a raise for Maria, officially labeled as a market adjustment. The amount was modest by Ethan's standards, but for Maria, it might be the breath of air she desperately needed. The following week, Maria stepped into his office, hesitant. Ethan was reviewing reports. "Mr. Ethan, may I ask something?" she said softly. "Of course," he replied, putting the papers down. "There's a mistake in my paycheck. I received more than usual." Ethan smiled. "No mistake. The company reassessed pay rates for all contracted staff. You deserve it." Maria stood still. Then she spoke slowly. "I appreciate that, truly, but I don't want pity. I just want to be paid fairly for my work." Ethan nodded. "I understand, and this is exactly that, nothing more. You're not receiving anything you haven't earned." Maria nodded faintly and turned to leave. But as she walked away, Ethan saw her eyes glistening, perhaps from exhaustion, or maybe because someone had finally seen the weight she carried. Ethan remained alone, heart full of something he hadn't felt in years. He never imagined that, from a piggy bank and a child's drawing, he'd find a truth powerful enough to stir a soul. Everything seemed to be settling down. Maria and Lily continued coming in each morning to clean. Ethan often made sure he was in the office early, sometimes just to catch a glimpse of Lily's laughter. Even other employees had begun to take notice. Someone had brought cookies for her during a break just last week. But one morning, that quiet peace was shattered. Ethan was in his office when the front desk called, "Mr. Walker, there's a man here asking to see Maria Gomez. He says he's her ex-husband. Should we let them meet in the lobby?" Ethan tightened his grip on the phone. Ex-husband? Maria had never mentioned anyone. "Bring him to the small conference room on the 3rd floor," Ethan said firmly. "I'll handle it." 10 minutes later, Maria stepped into Ethan's office, her face pale and voice shaking. "Mr. Ethan, they told me Daniel's here. He showed up." "You don't have to face him alone," Ethan replied, standing. "I'm coming with you." Maria didn't argue. She simply nodded and followed him upstairs. When they opened the door to the meeting room, Ethan saw a man in his mid-30s, tall and scruffy, dressed in a careless way. His face was gaunt, his eyes calculating and smug. The moment he saw Maria, he stood up, flashing a fake smile. "Maria, you still look the same," he said, then turned to Ethan. "And this must be the boss?" Ethan shook his hand, firm and clear, establishing a boundary. "I'm Ethan Walker, and you're Daniel." "Daniel Ruiz," the man smiled. "Lily's father, Maria's ex-husband, but who knows? Things change." Maria clenched her fists. "Why are you here?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. He paced around the room, looking it over like a man surveying property, then finally spoke. "I heard you're working for someone well off. I heard Lily's back in school, has medicine, stable life. So I thought it's time I returned, as her father." Ethan's jaw tightened. "After 3 years of disappearing, no support, no calls, you think you can just walk back in and claim fatherhood?" Daniel shrugged. "I have legal rights. I'm still her biological father." Maria stepped forward, voice trembling. "Rights? Where were you when she had a fever of 104, when she cried on her birthday because no one showed up? When I had to choose between paying for her inhaler or the electricity bill? Where were you?" Daniel scoffed, but his eyes narrowed with frustration. "I had my reasons. But I'm here now, to make it right." Ethan stepped forward. "Are you here for Lily? Or just because now Maria's life doesn't look broken anymore?" That question silenced him. Then Daniel turned to Maria, tone shifting, layered with insinuation. "Just thought? Maybe someone's helping more than just with work?" Maria stiffened. She understood the implication. Ethan said nothing. No need to explain anything to this man. Just then, Lily peeked into the room, calling out, "Mommy, I finished my drawing." She ran inside, but stopped cold when she saw Daniel. "Poppy?" Her voice small and unsure. Daniel dropped to one knee, arms open. "Lily, do you remember Daddy?" Lily looked from her mother to Ethan, the man she trusted most. Her little face was full of confusion. "You can't just show up," Maria said, pulling Lily close. "She has stability now. You can't come in and undo everything." Daniel stood up, voice sharpening. "I'll talk to a lawyer. If you don't let me see her, I'll fight for custody." Ethan had had enough. He stepped forward, standing firmly between Daniel and the girls. "If you ever come near them again, I'll personally make sure you lose the right to call yourself a father." Daniel snarled. "We'll see each other again." In court. Then he turned and walked out, leaving behind a room filled with fear and tension. Maria trembled, holding Lily tightly. Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder and said quietly, "We won't let him hurt you. I promise." Less than a week after their tense encounter, Maria received the official court summons. Daniel Ruiz had filed for joint custody of Lily. The news hit her like a blow. She had never imagined that the man who had abandoned them could return and demand the right to be a father. "I have nothing to fight him with," she told Ethan, her hands trembling as she held the court documents. "I'm just a cleaner. I live in a rundown apartment. All I have is my love for my daughter." "You have the truth," Ethan replied gently, "and I won't let you face this alone." The very next day, Ethan arranged a meeting with Charles Benson, a well-known family attorney who had represented countless difficult cases. He had a reputation for defending single mothers, women who didn't have money but had everything else that mattered. Charles sat across from Maria in his quiet law office, flipping through paperwork. After hearing her story, he nodded slowly. "Maria, Daniel is Lily's biological father. That's a legal fact," he said clearly. "But he also disappeared for over 3 years. No child support, no phone calls, no visits." "He'll say he had depression," Maria whispered. "He'll use that to excuse it." "Maybe," Charles replied. "But the law also considers actions and the child's current environment. Your stability, Lily's emotional connection to you, and even Ethan's support. All of that matters." Ethan hesitated. "I've helped Maria financially. Could that be twisted against her?" Charles smiled. "As long as your relationship is transparent, consensual, and not transactional, your support shows integrity. If there's genuine affection, it only strengthens the idea of a stable family unit for the child." The days before court were sleepless for Maria. Her greatest fear wasn't losing Lily out of neglect, but losing her to a system that didn't see the invisible sacrifices. On the day of the hearing, Daniel arrived with a young, flashy lawyer who spoke with an easy, practiced smile. He started the argument confidently, painting Daniel as a reformed man who had stabilized his life and now sought to be a real father. Charles stood with a thick folder in hand. Lily's medication receipts, school tuition records, Maria's pay stubs, notes from the clinic, all proving Maria had been Lily's sole caretaker for 3 years. "Your Honor," Charles said, "this man reappears only after Maria receives financial support from Mr. Ethan Walker and suddenly wants custody. Is this love or opportunity?" Daniel spoke quickly. "I love my daughter. I just want to be part of her life." The judge, a seasoned man in his 60s, sharp-eyed but fair, turned to Maria. "Ms. Gomez, can you describe Lily's relationship with her biological father?" Maria swallowed. "Lily doesn't remember him well. When he showed up recently, she was confused. She was scared. She didn't understand why Daddy was shouting at Mommy." The judge nodded, then called the social worker assigned to the case to testify. She reported visiting Maria's home and interviewing Lily. "The child lives in a stable, loving environment. She is very attached to her mother. When asked about her father, she couldn't recall any memories. But when speaking of Mr. Ethan, she used words like warm, safe, makes Mommy smile. The room fell silent. Ethan bowed his head, deeply moved. The judge scribbled a few notes, then said, "The court will review all submitted evidence and deliver a ruling within 10 days." As they left the courtroom, Maria clung to Ethan and cried. She didn't say a word. She just wept, as if 3 years of silent struggle were finally breaking through. "Whatever happens, I'm grateful for you," she whispered. Ethan held her tightly, eyes steady. "I won't let you lose her, no matter what it takes. We'll keep this family together." The 10 days waiting for the court's ruling passed like a quiet storm. Maria barely slept. Ethan appeared calm, but inside he was just as anxious. To him now, Lily wasn't just Maria's daughter. She was part of something deeper, the first heartbeat of a family he never thought he'd have. Then the good news arrived. Daniel unexpectedly withdrew the custody petition. Through his attorney, he declared that he didn't want to drag the child into adult disputes. But Ethan knew the truth. Daniel had realized he couldn't win. When Maria read the official statement from Charles, she didn't say a word. She simply sat on the edge of the chair and slowly began to cry. But these weren't tears of fear. They were tears of relief. "Finally," she whispered, "I can breathe again." Ethan sat beside her, gently taking her hand. In that moment, there were no labels, no roles, just two people who had walked through fire to get here. Ethan's house had always felt like a museum, perfect, luxurious, but cold. Cream-colored walls, a spotless living room no one dared to sit in, and a kitchen that was barely ever used. It was a place he lived in, but never truly belonged to. Everything started to change the day Maria and Lily moved in. They didn't bring much, just a few suitcases, a box of books, some old toys of Lily's, and a small framed photo of the two of them together. But somehow, those few items carried an entire world of warmth into Ethan's once empty life. On the first morning, Ethan didn't wake up to his alarm. He woke to the sound of Lily laughing from the kitchen. He walked down and saw something he'd never seen before. Lily twirling around the dining table while Maria flipped eggs in the pan, her hair tied back, her smile glowing. A delicious aroma filled the air, the smell of breakfast, of real life. "Good morning, Ethan," Maria said, turning to him with a smile. He looked around, still half asleep. "The house, our house, it feels different." In just a few days, the home had taken on a new life. Lily's drawings were taped up all over the living room. Maria placed a small potted plant on the windowsill. A red and white checkered tablecloth appeared on the dining table. Simple, but somehow it made the whole room shine. In the evenings, they ate dinner together, not in front of a TV, but at the table, sharing food and laughter, with Lily's silly stories lighting up the space. "I've never had dinner like this," Ethan admitted one night. "I never imagined having dinner in a house like this," Maria replied, "but what matters most is who's sitting with you." One night, as Ethan tucked Lily into bed, she asked a question that stopped him in his tracks. "Ethan, if I ever have a little brother, will you play with him like you play with me?" Ethan chuckled. "Of course I will. You'll be the big sister." "Can I teach him to count money like I taught you?" He laughed. "If you manage to teach me, you can teach the whole world." That evening, Ethan and Maria sat on the balcony, looking out over the city lights. "I used to think being a single mother was the end of the road," Maria said softly. "But maybe it was just a turn I needed to take." "And maybe," Ethan said, gently squeezing her hand, "every house needs a little mess, a little laughter, and a whole lot of love to become a home." Maria rested her head on his shoulder. In both their hearts, something peaceful began to take root. Not the cold silence of a luxury mansion, but the warm stillness of a real family. It was a warm evening right after dinner. Maria was cleaning up the kitchen while Ethan sat at the table helping Lily with her coloring assignment. She was focused, coloring a princess dress in bright pink, when she suddenly looked up and asked, "Ethan, why haven't you married my mom yet?" The question dropped like a pebble in a still pond. Ethan froze mid-stroke. Maria, in the middle of wiping the table, stopped cold. Silence filled the kitchen. "Lily," Maria began, trying to steer the conversation elsewhere, but Ethan gently raised a hand. "It's okay," he said, then turned to Lily with a soft smile. "Why do you ask that?" "Because Mom smiles more since you've been here," Lily said plainly. "And I smile more too. My teacher says when people love each other, they get married. Does Mom love you?" Maria's face flushed. "Lily, you shouldn't ask adults things like that." "But you always tell me to ask when I want to understand," Lily mumbled. Ethan turned to Maria, his eyes serious and full of warmth. "What do you think?" Maria lowered her gaze, gripping the dish towel tightly. "I don't know. I do have feelings for you, Ethan. I'm truly grateful for everything you've done. But sometimes I'm scared. Scared this is just kindness, not love." Ethan stepped closer and gently took her hand. "Maria, I've had all the material things in the world, but no one has ever made me want to rush home the way you and Lily do. Every dinner beside you, every time Lily calls me her best friend. These are things I never thought I'd have. This isn't charity, it's love." Maria looked up at him, her eyes glistening. "So, if I said I love you, what would you do?" Ethan smiled. "I'd propose, without hesitation." A small cough came from behind the couch, Lily peeking over with wide eyes. "Ethan, if Mom says yes, can I wear a pink dress to the wedding?" Both of them burst into laughter. Ethan scooped her up in his arms. "You'll be the most important person there." Maria looked at them, a once closed-off man, a once lonely child, now wrapped in a moment of love and peace she had only dreamed of. "I don't know what the future holds," Maria said softly, "but I know one thing for sure. We are a family, and I want to keep it that way." 3 months later, on a gentle afternoon, Maria and Ethan held their wedding ceremony in the small garden behind Ethan's house. It wasn't lavish or grand, but it was filled with love. Maria wore a simple white dress, her hair loosely tied back with a wildflower tucked in, picked by Lily that very morning. Lily, proudly wearing her dream pink dress, carried the small pillow with the wedding rings. She walked carefully down the aisle, trying to look serious, but her glowing smile melted every heart present. When the officiant asked, "Does anyone object to this marriage?" Lily raised her hand. The crowd gasped. "I object if they don't get married right now?" Laughter broke out, blending into the golden light of the afternoon. Ethan took Maria's hand and whispered, "I've finally come home." Maria smiled. "And I've been waiting for you all along." They shared their first kiss as husband and wife, and the garden echoed with applause, laughter, and the beginning of a new chapter. One built not on perfection, but on trust, honesty, and love. On a quiet spring morning, with gentle sunlight pouring into the small kitchen, Maria stepped out of the bathroom, holding a pregnancy test in her trembling hands. Her smile was uncertain, but filled with emotion. Ethan was making breakfast when he turned around and caught her gaze. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. Maria didn't answer right away. She simply held up the test. Ethan looked at it and froze. 2 red lines. "Maria, you're—" "Yes," she nodded, her eyes misty. "I'm pregnant." A second passed, then another. Ethan stepped forward and wrapped his arms around her tightly. He couldn't speak. He just held her close. From across the room, little Lily came running on her tiny feet. "What's going on? Mommy, are you crying?" Maria knelt and opened her arms. Not sad tears, sweetheart. Happy ones. Why? Ethan knelt beside her. Lily, you're going to be a big sister. There's a baby on the way. Lily's eyes widened. Really? I'm going to have a sibling? A real baby? Maria nodded, and Lily jumped with joy. Can the baby sleep with me? I'll tell them fairy tales every night. Ethan laughed, his eyes shining. He picked Lily up and looked at Maria, the woman who had entered his life like a soft breeze, bringing love and quiet transformation. His gaze drifted to the familiar armchair in the corner, the place where, not long ago, he had pretended to sleep, testing the honesty of a 5-year-old girl. Everything had started there. He blinked, holding back tears. Thank you for coming into my life. Maria gently placed a hand on her belly where a tiny life was just beginning to grow. We're a family, and now we're going to be even more complete. In that moment, there was nothing more to say. They simply held each other, 3 people, 1 family, wrapped in a happiness as quiet and profound as the morning sun.